it's a weird mood today because of the day. But let's just get into the meat and bones of the memorial stuff. Um, the question of the day is going to be, because we don't have one from last week. Well, let's have a question of the day. And where were you guys on September 11th, 2001? Let us know in the comments. I'll go first since I'm asking the question. I was in second grade, and I think I was about 6 years old, and I was at Dayton Elementary School, and it was just, I guess it was just a normal day at school, and the teacher, Mrs. Taylor, came in, and she said that there was something big had happened, and she turned on the TV, and I mean, when the TV turns on in a classroom, everybody pays attention, right? So, and we didn't know what was going on until we turned to the news, and I think we tuned in at just as the first plane had hit, and it was like smoke was billowing out, and I just remember thinking, it didn't fully sink in. I was like, wait, a plane hit a building? Like, that never happens, right? Like, when has that ever happened? And so, as it went on, the second plane hit, and I remember that, and just like the horror of I don't even know. It's just the carnage of seeing two planes, and then they were talking about the Pentagon and the White House and all this other stuff, and it developed over time. But it was my first probably really horrifying memory as a kid, being in that second grade class, just kind of watching, just people, just I don't know, they were helpless. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that was my memory of 9/11. Who wants to share?
Well, Maddie doesn't really have much to share because she was 4 years old.
Yeah.
At 9/11, so which is kind of crazy to think about just by itself. Is
Yeah,
that
18
Right?
years. 18 years ago,
18
man.
years ago, people that were 4 are grown adults these days, and yet, even though it has been so long, there are things that happen in your life, like for many of you guys that listening out there is probably the Kennedy assassination.
Oh yeah.
The a lot of other events, the Oklahoma City bombing, OJ driving his Bronco.
Oh, the OJ chase, yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that has happened throughout our lives that we'll always remember. And for 9/11, I was pretty young too, but I was in 8th grade, and I remember just being in class, and all of a sudden the school secretary comes into the room, and she says, "Hey, turn on the TV. We're going to war."
Yeah.
Those were the words that she said.
Wow.
And as an 8th grader, we were like, "What?
What?
We're going to war? What?" And my dad had actually just retired from the army.
Right. Were you in Indiana by now?
I was in Indiana, and my dad had taken early retirement from the army. They were offering, because it was peace times, and it had been peace times for a long time, and so otherwise he probably would have been going to Afghanistan.
Right.
But one of the things that sticks with me the most is, as the second plane hit, you're starting to see all of the footage of the people jumping out of the building, rather than be burned alive.
Yeah.
And
That's a horrifying choice, isn't it?
yeah, and it's horrible to think about. But one good thing that did come out of it, I think that at least for a time, it really did draw us together as a country.
Oh, yeah.
Toward a common goal.
Yeah.
And that is something that good that comes out of disaster, is that people naturally draw together. They when something like that happens.
It's just sad it had to happen that way,
Yeah.
Maddie, do you have any memories, or just you want to share anything?
Honestly, I was in kindergarten when it happened,
You were
but
young,
I was
yeah.
4, so, and my memory's already awful as it is, but like I do remember like just like a hustle bustle type thing, like, and I was just kind of like, oh, what is going on,
what
like
is
just like a
going on?
little girl, like, and I couldn't really like put together what was happening. But one thing I do remember is I'm pretty sure they like released us like early from school that day. I'm pretty sure my mom came and like picked me up from school that day, like early.
Yeah.
Like I feel like I remember her coming to get me, and it like being kind of like a weird thing, because like the whole country was really impacted by that. Even though it was
Yeah.
in one specific part, it was like
Right.
like Jack said, it really kind of something
everybody
like that
together, yeah.
brings people together, which
Well, the really interesting thing is they grounded all the planes that day. Mm-hmm. There were no planes flying in the United States
Yep.
of America on that day because, you know, there was that plane, and then that plane, and then they hit the Pentagon, and then one went down in Pennsylvania, and they had no idea how many more there might
There
be.
was out there,
Right.
yeah. They thought there was. They didn't know was the problem. So it was like everyone has to be on the ground. If there's
Yeah.
if there's another one, there's a flying missile out there. So, oh man, it's just that's even 18 years later, it hurts, man. Like just thinking about it.
Well, I think that one thing too that's impacted me like throughout my life, even though I don't really remember the initial event as much, is just like the anniversary of it every year kind of like brings it up, you know, and like
Rehashes it a little
yeah,
bit.
and like you kind of think about like it
Well,
brings it
that's
back
the
to your
point, yeah.
mind.
That's
like
the never forget. It's supposed to be like that. That's what we want. That's why we're doing the show right now. Is because I don't want anyone to ever forget. I don't want anyone to ever forget that moment in that time because that's a defining moment in our history and you know we witnessed it firsthand. Not firsthand, but obviously we were in that time period. But our children and people that were born, you know, even 18 years ago, have no idea. They don't understand how big this event was in our country's history.
Well, and that's why history is so important. And I think that, you know, no offense to any teachers out there that might be listening, I do think that in a lot of cases, maybe not all, but a lot of cases, you know, we're doing ourselves a disservice by not teaching history.
Yeah.
Like I was taught when I was in high school. You know, American history. You know, learning about the shot heard around the world, Boston Tea Party, why we are the country we are today.
Yeah. It's important to know the story. It's important to know why we do the things we do, and it's also important to know why certain documents, specifically the Constitution and Declaration of Independence, you know, those documents have they're in context, you know, and this event 9/11 is in context. We have to, you know, there were events in the 90s that happened that led up to this, you know, aggression in the Middle East on all sides, and a whole bunch of different events that happened to get up to this point, right? So this is in context, but that doesn't lessen the blow of 3,000 people dying in one day. There's no excuse for that, and we're not going to get political. Sorry, but it's just I guess the big thing for us is that that moment in my life changed my life specifically, and I think it changed everybody's life. I went to New York City this past October and November, and I think that the city of New York has done a fantastic job memorializing the people who passed that day, and the firefighters and the first responders and everyone in their memorial there in New York City, and it was really jaw-dropping to be there at the ground zero and just see all the names and see the water and see the new tower, and they did it right. So it's a really big, you know, testament to the American dream in this country, what we did. So yeah, I don't want to be too sad, but that's the nature of this day, right? Like we can never forget the 3,000 people that died, and that's, you know, thoughts and prayers to them today and every day. So
Yeah, and you know, just I saw a Time magazine article a few years ago that was the main headline on the cover was "The Children of 9/11,"
Yeah.
and it was pictures of all of the kids that were born to women who were pregnant, and the fathers were victims in the attack. And so, you know, you think about this and how it's affected you in your life, and hopefully, you know, we also don't forget. While we don't forget the attack and we don't forget what was done to our country, I hope that we don't forget the people that are still living with
the remnants, yeah.
with the debris, because you know it may have been cleaned up in New York City, but you can't clean up the debris on the hearts and minds of the people that
Yeah.
lost loved ones.
Yeah. I mean, this really changed people's lives in New York City, and it left a scar on us. So, but I think we've bounced back better, and yeah. So,
Anyway.
sad day, Memorial Day, in memorial of 9/11 and all the people who passed, and this tragic event that happened 18 years ago today. Rest in peace, and may we never forget.